Imagine a world where computers were not laptops, phones, or ordinary machines sitting on a desk. They were huge, expensive, complicated. They belonged to universities, laboratories, governments, and giant corporations. For ordinary people, a computer felt distant, almost impossible to reach. But one teenager from Seattle looked at those machines and saw something others did not. He did not just see technology. He saw the future. His name was Bill Gates. And long before he became one of the richest and most powerful figures in the technology world, he was just a boy sitting in front of a school terminal, typing commands late into the night while most students had already gone home. That obsession would one day help create Microsoft, a company that changed how the world works, studies, communicates, and builds the digital future. The boy from Seattle. Bill Gates was born in 1955 in Seattle, Washington. His full name was William Henry Gates III. He did not come from poverty. His father was a lawyer, and his mother was active in business and civic life. Gates grew up in an educated, ambitious family where discipline, competition, and achievement mattered. But what made Bill different was not only his background, it was his mind. From a young age he was intensely curious. He read constantly, remembered information quickly, and loved to challenge people. He wanted to understand systems. He wanted to win arguments. He wanted to solve problems faster than everyone else. Then, at Lakeside School, everything changed. The school gained access to a computer terminal, something extremely rare for students at that time. For most teenagers, it was just a strange machine. For Bill Gates, it was a doorway into another world. Late at night, while other students went home, Gates stayed near the terminal, typing commands for hours. He studied how the machine responded, how code worked, how errors appeared, and how a human could control a computer through logic. It was there that he met another young technology enthusiast. His name was Paul Allen. Two friends who believed in the impossible. Paul Allen was older than Gates, calmer, and deeply fascinated by computers. Together they spent hours discussing programming, machines, and what the future might become. At that time, the idea of a personal computer sounded almost ridiculous. Why would an ordinary person need a computer? What would they even do with it? Who would pay for such a machine? But Gates and Allen believed something different. They believed computers would one day move out of laboratories and into offices, schools, businesses, and homes. Today that sounds obvious. Back then it sounded almost impossible. But they understood one essential truth before many others did. A computer by itself was only hardware. The real power was in the software. The magazine that changed everything. In 1975, Paul Allen saw a magazine cover featuring the Altair 8800, one of the first personal computers. It did not look like a modern computer. There was no beautiful screen, no friendly interface, no easy keyboard. It looked rough, technical, and unfinished. But to Allen it was a signal. He showed it to Gates. And both of them understood. The personal computer revolution was beginning. If these machines were going to spread, they needed software. And if someone could provide that software early enough, they could stand at the center of an entirely new industry. So Gates and Allen made a risky move. They contacted the company behind the Altair and said they had a version of the basic programming language for the machine. But there was one serious problem. They did not actually have it yet. They had promised a product that was not ready. It could have destroyed their reputation before their careers had even begun. But instead of backing away, they worked relentlessly. They built a working version of BASIC for the Altair. And it worked. That success became the foundation for Microsoft. Soon after, Gates and Allen founded the company. At first, its name was written as Microsoft, a combination of microcomputer and software. Later, the hyphen disappeared, and the name became one of the most famous in business history. Microsoft. The big idea behind Microsoft. Many companies in the 1970s were focused on hardware. Who could build the better computer? Who could design the stronger machine? Who could sell more physical equipment? But Gates saw something deeper. He believed the future would not belong only to companies that built computers. It would belong to companies that created the systems that made those computers useful. In other words, whoever controlled the software could shape the future of computing. That became Microsoft's great strategy. The company did not need to build every computer. It needed to become the company every computer maker depended on. And then came the deal that changed everything. The IBM deal, the move that built an empire. In the early 1980s, IBM was a giant. It was one of the most respected technology companies in the world, a symbol of corporate computing power. IBM wanted to build a personal computer, and it needed an operating system. For Microsoft, this was the opportunity of a lifetime. But Microsoft did not yet have the exact operating system IBM needed. Once again, Gates faced a dangerous moment. He could admit they were not ready, or he could find a way. Microsoft acquired and adapted an existing operating system known as 86-DOS, originally connected to Seattle Computer Products. Microsoft then provided IBM with a version that became known as MS-DOS. But the real genius was not only in the software, it was in the deal. Microsoft did not give IBM total ownership forever. Instead, it kept the right to license MS-DOS to other computer manufacturers. At first, that may sound like a small legal detail. In reality, it became one of the most important business decisions in technology history. When the IBM PC became successful, other companies began creating IBM-compatible computers. And those computers needed an operating system. Microsoft could sell MS-DOS again and again. Not to one company, not to one machine, but to an entire market. That was how Microsoft stopped being just a small software company. It became the center of the personal computer revolution. Windows, making the computer human. MS-DOS was powerful, but it was not simple. Users had to type commands. They had to remember instructions. They had to speak the machine's language. But ordinary people did not want that. They wanted something visual, something easier, something that felt less like operating a machine and more like using a tool. Apple was already showing the world a more visual future with graphical interfaces. Gates understood that Microsoft had to move. That is why Microsoft pushed toward Windows. The first versions were not perfect. They were criticized. They were compared to Apple. Many people doubted whether Microsoft could truly create a system ordinary users would love. But Gates did not need Windows to win overnight. He needed it to keep improving. And Microsoft kept pushing. It worked with computer manufacturers. It built an ecosystem. It made Windows available on a massive number of machines. Then, in 1995, everything exploded. Windows 95, the moment Microsoft took over daily life. The release of Windows 95 was not just a software launch. It was a cultural event. There were huge advertisements, long lines, massive public attention, and a new feature that became instantly iconic, the Start button. For millions of people, Windows 95 made the personal computer feel normal. Not mysterious. Not only for engineers. Normal. People used PCs to write documents, build spreadsheets, play games, organize files, study, work, and connect to the internet. Windows became the digital desk of the modern world. By the late 1990s, Microsoft had become one of the most valuable companies on Earth, and Bill Gates became known as the richest man in the world for many years. But just as Microsoft seemed almost unbeatable, a new threat appeared. And this time it was not just another operating system. It was the internet. The internet tidal wave. In the mid-1990s, the internet began changing everything. At first, Microsoft did not move fast enough. The company had dominated personal computers, but the internet was creating a new battlefield. A company called Netscape became one of the early stars of the web with its browser, Netscape Navigator. For the first time, there was a real question. What if the browser became more important than Windows? What if people no longer cared what operating system they used as long as they could access the web? That possibility was dangerous for Microsoft. Bill Gates realized the threat. In 1995, he wrote a famous internal memo often remembered as the Internet Tidal Wave Memo. The message was clear. The internet was not a side trend. It was the next major shift in computing. Microsoft had to respond. And it did. The company launched Internet Explorer and entered what became known as the browser war against Netscape. This was one of the most aggressive chapters in Microsoft's history. Microsoft used its power, its Windows dominance, and its distribution strength to push Internet Explorer onto millions of computers. The strategy worked. Internet Explorer became dominant. But it also brought massive criticism. Microsoft's power was now so great that governments, competitors, and critics began asking whether the company had become too strong. The dark side of success. The bigger Microsoft became, the more controversial it was. Critics accused the company of using aggressive tactics to crush competition. They argued that Microsoft's control over Windows gave it unfair power over the software industry. Bill Gates developed a reputation as a brilliant but extremely tough businessman. He was demanding, competitive, relentless. He did not just want Microsoft to participate in the future. He wanted Microsoft to define it. In the late 1990s, Microsoft faced a major antitrust case in the United States. The case became one of the most famous legal battles in technology history. For Microsoft, it was a turning point. The company was no longer seen only as the heroic builder of the personal computer age. It was also seen as a giant whose power frightened its rivals. And that made Bill Gates' story more complicated. He was a visionary. He was a strategist. But he was also a fierce competitor who understood that in technology, being good was not enough. You had to become the standard. Why Microsoft won? Microsoft did not win because it always created the most beautiful products. It did not win because it was always first. It won because Gates understood the power of the default. If Windows ran on millions of computers, developers would build software for Windows. If developers built software for Windows, more people would buy Windows computers. If more people used Windows, businesses, schools, and governments would depend on it. That cycle made Microsoft incredibly powerful. Windows, Office, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, these tools became part of everyday life for millions of people. Microsoft was not just selling software. It was building habits. People learned to work inside Microsoft's world. Companies organized their offices around Microsoft tools. Schools taught students how to use them. That is how Microsoft became more than a company. It became part of modern life. Bill Gates after the peak. Over time, Bill Gates stepped away from daily leadership at Microsoft. He began focusing more on philanthropy, global health, education, poverty, and major world problems. This became a new chapter in his life. The man who made billions from the digital revolution began using enormous resources to try to solve real-world challenges. Meanwhile, Microsoft continued without him as its main leader. The company faced new rivals: Google, Apple, Amazon, smartphones, cloud platforms, and artificial intelligence. There were mistakes. There were missed opportunities. There were moments when people wondered whether Microsoft had lost the future. But Microsoft changed again. Today it is no longer only Windows. It is Office, Azure, Xbox, LinkedIn, cloud computing, enterprise software, and artificial intelligence. The company that began with a risky promise became one of the strongest forces in the modern technology world. Microsoft was born from a belief that sounded almost impossible at the time. One day computers would be everywhere. Bill Gates did not invent the computer. He did not build the digital age alone. But he understood something many others underestimated. The future would not belong only to machines. It would belong to the software that made those machines useful. From Altair Basic to MS-DOS, from Windows to the Internet battles, from Office to the cloud, Microsoft helped shape the way billions of people interact with technology. And it all began with a boy in Seattle, sitting near a computer terminal, typing late into the night. Others saw a machine. Bill Gates saw a future. And then he built a company powerful enough to help bring that future to the world.